everybody, DeathsStalker here. So, the Austrian Grand Prix has been completed. And boy, what a race. Now, I'm going to start off with the news that Ducati announced at the beginning of practice for this race that they were going to make their decision about Dovi, Andrea Dovizioso, someday I'll get it right, whether or not they were going to settle a contract with him after these next two races. And everyone thought, well, that's kind of late because everyone else has pretty well been tied up, and Dovi's probably the last top rider available for a contract. So that's neither here nor there. So the practice goes pretty well. Qualifying goes pretty good. The Ducatis actually don't do too bad. Yamahas, they are fast for a lap or two, but they do seem to have problems with consistency. But you know, nothing much interesting going on as far as practice and whatnot goes. And then Dovi's manager drops a bombshell that Dovi will not be signing with Ducati. And of course social media went nuts, and it looks like, I guess, Dovi's not happy and he's just cutting ties. It's done. So now let's get to the race. Now, before the race for the MotoGP race, the Moto2 race was actually red flagged because a rider came over the crest of a hill and lost it. Okay, he crashed all by himself. Not a big deal, but the problem was it was over top of a hill. It's just a slight rise. It's not like Mount Everest. And of course, the guys coming over top, they wouldn't see it till the last second. So even though there was flags waving, there was you know, guys trying to miss the bike, and eventually one rider did collide with the bike and ended up getting slightly injured. So supposedly Happy Siren, who used to race MotoGP but got demoted back to Moto2, got some bruising on his hip, but he's going to be okay. So that was kind of a big scare for everybody, because that's not type of a crash that you expect to have or be involved in. So for the MotoGP race, which followed after the restart of the Moto2 race, Jack Miller got a good start. Dovi actually had a good start. Paulo Spargo was right there, and Paul was not wasting any time. People actually had him tagged to win the race because his race pace over the whole weekend was very, very good. And Maverick Vinales had a horrible start. So did Fabio Quartararo. He had a horrible start, and then he tried to make up for it, and he actually ran off the track and got back on in 20th place. So he was like miles behind. So his race was essentially over. And Valentino, not too bad. He was working his way up, and about 6 laps into it, Franco Morbidelli and Johan Zarco came together and their bikes touched. It was the front wheel to back wheel, which is like the worst type of... I do not like people who keep crawling out to... Anyways, it's the worst type of crash you can probably have. So they both came off the bikes, were into the gravel trap. The bikes went flipping and tossing, and one of the bikes actually stayed on its wheels for a bit before it actually started doing endos. And this track, it's got a slight kink to the left, and then it cuts to the right. So the racers were actually in the middle of the right turn, then all of a sudden these two bikes went between people, and I kid you not, Valentino Rossi almost got killed. Franco Morbidelli's bike missed him, I'm going to say, by about a quarter of a meter. Like, Valentino was leaned over in the corner, and all of a sudden his bike and pieces went by him, and then more pieces. It just like he actually, they red flagged the race. He came in and he got off the bike, and he basically, like, his hands were shaking, like it was like, and actually anybody who saw it, like I know MotoGP has released the crash, and I'll put a link to it in here so you can watch it if it's on YouTube, but it'll probably be easier to get to. I'll put the link for that as well. But it was, oh yeah, it was like absolutely beyond scary. Like, this was not something that you ever want to see. And as a racer, that's the worst thing you can happen, is having a bike hit you, especially one that was traveling 200 miles an hour when it did. So you know that would have been the big one. So that was bad. Now they red flagged the race, of course. Everyone went back in. Pole was pissed because he was leading the race at the time by a good several seconds, and no one was even close to him. And so they had to restart. But then there was a problem. Because of the practices and whatnot, the teams are only allowed certain number of tires. You get X number of fronts, rears, of soft, medium, and hards. And the same for rains, if they offer different types of rain tires. And most guys had used up their allotment, so they didn't have a spare tire to put on. So it was pretty bad. Jack Miller was all out of medium fronts and rears, so he ended up having to put softs on his bike, and he figured he could probably make it work, and he almost did. I'll get to that later. But so they had to restart. Fabio, of course, had to start in 20th place because he was literally at the back of the grid. And Maverick Vinales, you know, same thing. He was quite a few spots down from where he started. They dropped the lights went out, and Jack Miller took off, and he was like a jackrabbit on those soft tires. And he started to put some distance between him and the other guys, but eventually Dovi started to chase him down and pass him. And because once Dovi's tires were up to temperature and whatnot, everything was good. And so he ended up eventually passing that Jack and taking the lead. But then Dovi, being Dovi, he actually controlled the pace of the race, so people were actually getting bundled up behind him, and which was fine for him. And well, a lot of guys on bikes. And Pole was trying to catch back up. He was down in 3rd or 4th place, and he made some mistakes, ended up falling further behind. Then he catch up, and you can tell he was like getting hot under the collar, and he went to a corner, drifted a little wide, and then he cut back in, you know, to finish the corner. And one of the other KTM riders on the other team was there. They collided, and they both went down. So it was, you know, another DNF for him. And, you know, unfortunately, the other rider who was taken out, I think that's the 2nd or 3rd time this season he's been taken out through no fault of his own. So it was it really sucked for the guy. Alex Rins, who of course is still recovering from shoulder surgery, was doing an awesome job. He had worked his way up to 3rd, and was doing a really good job. He got himself ahead of Jack Miller, and he was chasing Dovi down, and he almost lost the front end. Going into a corner, saved it, and then not a lap later he passes Dovi for the lead and loses the front end and crashes out. He wasn't hurt, but you know, it was a DNF that, you know, he probably could have just settled for 2nd, and he would have had it easily. But Maverick Vinales just went to the back of the grid and couldn't go anywhere. He'd do a good lap, then he'd do a really crappy lap and a good lap. Later found out that at the end of the race, his clutch was slipping, which is, if that happens in a race, as a racer, you're screwed. There's nothing you can do about it. So that's 2 very bad finishes from Maverick. The last race he finished badly was because they made the wrong tire choice, and the tire just didn't work. So it was brutal, but you know, it's racing. Valentino had worked his way up to 5th place, and considering, you know, he was, you know, within a millisecond of no longer even being on this planet, I think he was probably more than thrilled with that. Brad Binder, who started way at the back, managed to finish 4th, which is just absolutely amazing. Now Jack Miller, he was fighting with Jean Mir, who had not had what you'd call a spectacular career so far in MotoGP. He had a lot of DNFs and a lot of other problems, and he had got up to 3rd place and was following Miller around, but Miller's tires were gone. They just basically weren't working anymore. So Jack actually was trying to do all he could do to keep his 2nd place. And you can see that for about the last 5-6 laps, he was blocking more than racing. He was just taking wide lines, because the Ducatis are fast. If he gets in a straight line, he could just run away from the Suzukis, but he didn't want the Suzuki to get in front of him, because once he got in front, he wouldn't be able to use his horsepower. And unfortunately, in the last corner, he or sorry, 2 corners from the end, I think it was, he made a slight mistake, and Mir managed to get in front of him, and there was really nothing Jack could do. So Jack finished 2nd, and for him that's a win anyways, because he's actually never scored any points at the Red Bull Ring. He's either DNF'd or he's crashed out. So he was quite happy, actually. This is the first time ever getting points there in all years of racing at this track in MotoGP. Mir thrilled 2nd place, very first ever podium. Goes to prove Suzuki was pretty right. The Suzuki motorcycle was actually working very good on this track. Even though it doesn't quite have the horsepower, it's got edge grip up the wazoo. And the winner, Andrea Dovizioso. So I believe it's now 3 out of the 4 wins on this track from the Ducati in the last couple of years has been done by him. And he was asked, actually, at the Parc Fermé, which is where they talk to the winners just after the race, if there was any chance of, you know, with this win, of him and Ducati getting back together, and Dovi just went, nope. So obviously they are done, which is a shame, but it was still awesome to see Dovi win. More importantly, Dovi is now in the point standing 2nd in the standings, and he's only you know, I think less than 20 points away from, I'll put it up here, from Fabio. And so there is going to be a battle for the win. Brad Binder, who won the last race of the last weekend and finished 4th in this race, has shown he's definitely got talent, and it wasn't just a flash in the pan. And surprisingly, I believe he's also 4th in the championship now. Not bad for your first MotoGP season. So that's it for this particular race. Of course, they're going to be doing it again next week. Same track, same racers, just a different name. Whatever it is, I can't keep track anymore. Anyways, hope you enjoyed it. DeathsStalker, signing off.